Right before stepping onto the court against Alex, Anisimova said something you don't usually hear from a player about to compete in her own country. She admitted the stadium probably won't be rooting for her. Might not. Probably won't. This is a woman ranked number 10 in the world, 2 Grand Slam finals already on her resume, talking like she's the visiting team. On American soil. So what exactly happened these past few months that made a top 10 player brace herself like that? Here's the thing. Nobody made her say it. Amanda wasn't cornered by a reporter fishing for a soundbite. She brought it up on her own. Minutes after finishing her own match, standing in front of a camera she didn't have to stand in front of. She could have said something safe. The kind of answer players give when they're trying to get off the podium quickly. Instead, she said the stadium was going to be packed. And she already knew, before a single ball had been hit, exactly who the crowd would be cheering for, and it wasn't going to be her. To understand why that admission actually carries weight, you have to understand who Alex is right now, because this isn't some rookie sneaking up quietly on a veteran nobody saw coming from. This is a 21-year-old who just won her first WTA title in Washington, then made a semifinal run in Berlin, then pushed through to the 4th round at Wimbledon, on grass, a surface that has never really been her friend. The ranking system officially has her at number 20 right now. But here's the detail most previews are skipping entirely. The live rankings, the ones that actually update in real time based on what's happening on court this week, already have her sitting at number 17, which means on paper she's 20. In practice, right now, this week, she's already moved past that number. That gap between the official label and the real one tells you something. She's not catching up to her ranking. Her ranking is catching up to her. Amanda, on the other hand, is the established name in this matchup. 24 years old. 2 Grand Slam finals. A player who once beat Simona Halep at 17 years old to reach a French Open semifinal, back in a stretch of tennis where she was the one everyone kept calling the future of the sport. But her path hasn't been one straight line upward. She stepped away from tennis completely for 8 months. Her ranking fell all the way down to 373. Outside the top 300, for a player who'd already reached a major semifinal as a teenager. And she came back anyway, and climbed all the way back into the top 10. That's not a small comeback. That's the kind of thing that usually gets its own documentary. So picture Monday for a second. 2 players who have never once faced each other on tour, standing across the net from one another for the very first time. One of them clawed her way back from outside the top 300. The other is riding the best stretch of tennis of her young career. A stretch good enough that the live rankings already can't keep up with her results. And somehow, in this matchup, it's the veteran who sounds nervous about the crowd, not the newcomer. There's one more detail worth sitting with before we go any further, because it's easy to miss on a first pass. When Amanda talked about Alex ahead of this match, she didn't just mention the results, the titles, the runs deep into tournaments. She specifically brought up the return of serve, called it dangerous, unprompted, and coming from someone who has personally beaten Grand Slam champions in her career, that's not small talk. That's not a polite thing you say about an opponent to sound gracious in front of reporters. That's a scouting report, delivered out loud, days before either of them had struck a single ball against each other. And that's really the question this entire thing sits on. Is this stadium reaction actually just a loud fan base showing up for someone they love? The kind of thing that happens for a lot of rising players and fades the moment the story gets old. Or is it something else entirely? Something that's been quietly building match after match, city after city, that Amanda can already feel even though she hasn't played a single point against her yet. Stick around, because the numbers behind this matchup tell a story that doesn't line up with the rankings at all, official or live. And once you actually see them side by side, you'll understand exactly why Amanda walked into this week already choosing her words this carefully. Here's where things get interesting. Ranking says Amanda's ahead. Number 10 against a player sitting between 17 and 20, depending on which system you're looking at. Not a massive gap on paper, but still a gap. The kind of number that makes people assume they already know how this match is going to go before either player has stepped onto the court. Except rankings measure where you've been. They don't measure what you're doing right now, in real time, on the surface you're actually about to play on. And once you actually put this year side by side, match by match, the whole picture shifts. Alex has won 38 matches in 2026. Amanda has won 18. That's 20 more wins, in the same calendar year, for the player everyone keeps calling the underdog walking into Monday. Alex has played 57 matches total this season. Amanda has played 28, almost exactly half. Which means heading into their first ever meeting, the player with the lower ranking is also the player carrying double the match reps, double the recent battle testing, double the number of times she's had to find a way to close out a tight third set with everything on the line. Think about what that actually means. Because it's not just a fun stat to throw around. It's about rhythm. A player who's been on court 57 times this year has already lived through slow starts, has already choked slightly, and figured out how to recover mid-match, has already made the small mistakes that come from fatigue, and adjusted on the fly because there wasn't time not to. A player who's played 28 matches has had more rest, sure, more recovery time between tournaments, but noticeably less recent exposure to that exact kind of live fire pressure. So when people casually assume experience automatically favors the higher-ranked, more decorated player here, that assumption starts to wobble the second you actually line the two seasons up next to each other. And this is where the story stops being about numbers entirely and starts being about something harder to quantify. Because there's a real difference between a crowd cheering for talent and a crowd cheering out of something closer to belonging. Alex hasn't just been winning matches this year. She's been carrying an audience with her, city to city, arena to arena. Washington, Toronto, now Cincinnati. Same volume, same intensity, completely different building each time. That's not a coincidence, and it's definitely not something that happens by accident. That's a fan base that shows up regardless of the opponent, regardless of the round, regardless of whether the match is tucked away on a side court or sitting front and center on the main stadium schedule. Amanda knows this. She's felt versions of it before, even if not specifically from Alex until now. Every top player has walked into a stadium at some point where the crowd clearly belonged to someone else. But there's something different about experiencing that in your own country. In a stadium, an easy drive from where plenty of American fans could just as easily be filling those same seats for her instead. And she said it herself, without being pushed into it, before either of them had struck a single ball against the other. She's expecting to walk out there and play like the outsider, on home soil. Sit with that for a second, because it's a genuinely strange sentence once you actually say it out loud. An American player, at a tournament held in the United States, essentially telling reporters ahead of time that she expects to be treated like the away team. That's not modesty for the sake of sounding humble. It's not some polite compliment tossed toward an opponent either. That's Amanda reading the room accurately, days in advance, and choosing to say the uncomfortable version out loud instead of pretending everything's normal. Here's the part most previews are going to completely skip over though. This match isn't happening in isolation, disconnected from everything else on the calendar. This is the last 1,000-level event before the US Open, the tournament where Amanda, an American, will be playing in front of home crowds again, except at an even bigger stage, with even higher stakes attached to every single match. So in a strange way, Cincinnati becomes a kind of preview, not a tennis preview, a pressure preview. If she can walk into a stadium full of people rooting for someone else here, this week, and still find her rhythm anyway, that's essentially a dress rehearsal for something much bigger waiting 2 weeks later. Now, to be clear, Amanda isn't walking into Monday without weapons of her own. This isn't a story about one dangerous player and one nervous one standing across from each other. She hits the ball heavy off both wings, the kind of ball striking that ends points fast when she's locked in. Her serve, especially out wide, has quietly been one of the more underrated shots on tour for years, the kind of shot that doesn't trend online but wins her free points match after match. She's the type of player who can end a rally in 3 shots if you give her even a sliver of room to load up and swing through it. So when two completely different toolkits collide for the very first time, one built on speed and unpredictability, the other built on raw, controlled power, that's not a mismatch waiting to happen. That's two very different kinds of danger stepping onto the same court, with a crowd sitting right in the middle of it that's already picked its side before the first point has even been played. And that's really what pushes this past being just another third-round match on a Monday schedule. It's not simply two players who've never faced each other before. It's an established name who now has to prove she can win somewhere that doesn't automatically feel like hers, going up against a rising player who's quietly turned belonging on the road into the single biggest weapon of her entire season. So here's the question worth carrying into everything that comes next. If crowd noise really is the deciding factor everyone keeps circling back to, the numbers behind this match should back that story up clearly. But if it's not really about the crowd at all, if it's closer to timing, to rhythm, to who's actually logging matches, and adjusting in real time, versus who's coming in fresher but rustier, then the loudest stadium in Cincinnati might end up being the least important detail in how Monday actually plays out. Either way, Amanda already told us what she's bracing for. What she hasn't told us yet is whether she genuinely believes she can win in spite of it. Stay with this, because what happens next is the part almost nobody covering this match is actually talking about. The real proof isn't only in what Amanda said right after her win. It's in what she said again, on a completely different platform, days later, when nobody was pushing her to repeat herself at all. She said it once, right after her match, standing in front of reporters who'd just watched her win in straight sets. That's easy enough to write off. Athletes say things in the moment all the time, adrenaline still running through them, a camera shoved in their face, no real time to think carefully about the exact words coming out. But then she said it again, a different setting entirely. Sitting down for Tennis Channel, no immediate rush of a match still buzzing through her system, plenty of time to soften what she'd said if she wanted to. And she didn't soften it. If anything, she leaned further into it. Said she genuinely loves playing in front of a packed house. Said she actually wants to feed off that kind of energy, even fully knowing most of it isn't going to be pointed her way once the match starts. That second version matters more than people give it credit for. One offhand comment right after a win. Sure, maybe that's just something nice you say in the moment. But two separate moments, two completely different platforms, the exact same message, days apart from each other. That's not something that accidentally slipped out under pressure. That's something she genuinely believes, said twice on purpose. And it lines up perfectly with everything Alex has quietly built over the past several months. Because none of this crowd phenomenon happened by accident either. Go back to Washington. Same energy in the stands. Toronto. Same thing again. Every single stop on this stretch of the tour, it's followed her. Arena after arena. Not because of one viral clip that happened to blow up online for a week. It's cumulative. It's been built match by match, city by city. The exact same slow way any real, lasting following gets built in this sport. Which is exactly why Amanda brought it up completely unprompted in the first place. She's not guessing at this. She's seen the pattern with her own eyes, from the other side of the net at other tournaments, long before she ever had to face Alex herself. Now here's a detail that's genuinely easy to scroll past, but really shouldn't be. If Alex wins this match, that's her 10th career win over a top 10 opponent. 10th, at 21 years old. Think about how many players spend an entire career chasing that number and never actually get there, let alone reach it before they're old enough to rent a car in some countries. That number isn't hype dressed up to sound impressive for a thumbnail. It's simply what tends to happen when a player keeps saying yes to the toughest possible tops on the schedule, instead of quietly avoiding them whenever she gets the choice. So the real question sitting underneath all of this isn't really about how loud a stadium gets on a Monday night. It's whether pressure like that can actually shake someone who's already been to 2 Grand Slam finals. Someone who's already proven, more than once, on stages far bigger than a third-round match in Ohio, that she can hold up under enormous weight. That's the honest tension here. Not whether the crowd will be loud, because everyone already knows it will be. The real question is whether that noise actually changes anything that happens on court, or whether it just becomes background static to someone who's already stood on far bigger stages than this one. And that's where this stops being a story about one single match. Because this is the last 1,000-level event before the US Open. 2 weeks out, almost to the day. Which means whatever happens here isn't only about who advances to the next round on the bracket. It's a preview of something much bigger specifically for Amanda. If a crowd like this one manages to rattle her, even slightly, that's worth knowing before she walks into an even louder one at home, on the single biggest stage American tennis has to offer. And if it doesn't rattle her at all, if she can find her rhythm out there anyway, that tells you just as much about her heading into New York, maybe more. For Alex, this match means something entirely different. It's not really about survival at this point in her season. It's about confirmation. Confirmation that everything that's happened this year, city after city, tournament after tournament, wasn't some temporary hot streak that was always going to cool off. The second she ran into someone with real experience on the biggest stages the sport has to offer. A win here doesn't just add one more name to a growing list. It tells everyone who's still quietly doubting the run that this is real, and it isn't slowing down anytime soon. So when Amanda said she was bracing for a packed stadium, she wasn't really talking about noise at all, not underneath it. She was talking about something much closer to identity. about walking into her own country and still having to prove, point by point, that she belongs there just as much as the player everyone's actually shown up to watch. That's not a thing you hear often from someone at her level, and it's definitely not something that comes from a player who's grown used to comfort. Maybe that's the real headline hiding in all of this. Not that a stadium is going to be loud on Monday night. Stadiums are loud all the time. That part was never really in question. It's that one of the best players in the entire world looked ahead, saw exactly what was coming her way, and instead of pretending it wouldn't affect her one bit, she said it out loud, twice, before it had even happened. Whether that honesty actually turns into strength once she's standing out there for real, down a set, the whole building roaring for the player on the other side of the net, that's something no interview can tell you in advance. That's something you only find out by watching it happen live. So Monday, when Alex and Amanda finally step onto that court together for the very first time in either of their careers, you're not just watching a third-round match at a mid-August tournament anymore. You're watching whether that admission actually holds up under real pressure, in real time, in front of the exact crowd Amanda already told everyone, twice, was coming. If you want to see how it actually plays out, that first meeting, that crowd, that specific kind of pressure neither of them has faced from each other before, it's genuinely worth being there for. Because whatever happens on that court Monday is going to tell us a lot more than just who wins one match in Cincinnati.